Okay. Number 7 for me now. The Los Angeles Clippers, I have at 7. This team has moved up into the top 4 in the West right before the All-Star break. Everyone is so close, so it almost doesn't matter. But this formula is pretty simple in terms of why they can win the title, right? It's you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George mixed with the top 10 defense.
Yep, and just quietly, Kawhi has played 28 out of the last 36 games. The minutes with Paul George, predictably very good. We know they can defend, but offensively, the offensive rating is 121 with those two on the floor. Now it's been around 700 minutes. I don't think they really care where the minutes are entering the postseason as long as they play some games heading in there. So they're on the right path. So that's obviously why the Clippers can win the title. They remind me, and I don't know how many Australians you've got listening to this podcast, Sam, but if anyone has any idea about the NBL, there's a team, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, that are always a theoretical team. Now, they're terrible defensively, so it's not a perfect comparison. But they are the team that I always, every season, get tricked into thinking, I think they could win the title. And they never do. Yeah. And so I'm like that with the Clippers. Love them. Questionable some of the stuff they've done in the last week, which I'm sure we'll get to. But the Kawhi and Paul George theoretical superstar duo can win you a title, no doubt.
Yeah, so they're a plus 10.5 in those minutes that Kawhi and Paul George have played, which is enormous. You can trust those two when they're on the court to be great. Obviously, there's the when they're on the court factor, and that's enormous with Kawhi. Can Kawhi consistently play every single night in the playoffs? I think he'll try at the very least, and I think there's a good chance he can. What worries me with them is their offense just gets so stagnant, and it just gets so ball stoppery. And this is where the Russell Westbrook thing comes in, what you just alluded to. I understand the theory of why the players on this team think that they need someone that can push up tempo, right? I get it on some level because this team can go very slow, and having someone that can push the pace and try and create easy offense for them would be valuable. The problem for me is more in the half court that they're very stagnant. They just really, really don't move the ball at all. It's why Terrence Mann, I think, has been awesome is like the quote unquote starting point guard for them because he keeps the ball moving. He's completely unselfish in a way that they desperately need from someone at that position. Maybe Russell Westbrook comes in and he's been humbled in some way by his experience with the Lakers and playing with a very close friend of his in Paul George, continuing to get to live at home in Los Angeles, which I think really matters to him, getting to play in front of basically his people, right, in Los Angeles. He does have a very real fan base in that city, regardless of how it went. He's a personal fan base in that city, even though the Lakers did not go well. So I get it. All of this to say is I do get it from them in terms of their perspective of why they thought this could make sense. I just think that it's going to be too ball stoppery, and they're probably going to end up riding with guys like Eric Gordon, guys like Terrence Mann at the end of the day in the playoffs when the big possessions come down to it, just because that's what's going to be a little bit more functional to get Paul George and Kawhi Leonard the ball.
Yeah, that'll be the question. And I would love particularly because he's gone from the Lakers to the Clippers, I would love a Westbrook redemption tour here and they go on a run.
It would be the coolest story. It would be the coolest story in the NBA, I think.
It would be really, really fun. So I would love to see it. But they also made a trade for Plumlee, which, by the way, I don't mind. You got to have, we've seen games with the Clippers as well where Zubats is fouled out or he's unable to play for some reason. They just had nothing behind it. So I get it. That's fine to bring in another center. But the problem is no Reggie Jackson, no Kennard, shooters as well. And then you bring in the Westbrook. And if you're going to play Westbrook, in theory, if you have Zubats on the floor, maybe it's Plumlee, you're always going to have two non-shooters that the defense isn't too worried about. Now, can Westbrook do some stuff in pick and roll? Will he ever be a screener? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know whether that's going to happen. He's not on the huge contract anymore, but I highly doubt. I've heard some people say, well, it's a no-risk move. They can just cut him. I mean, I do not see that happening this close to the postseason. So they're going to ride this out. What disruption does that have? Who knows?
Yeah, and look, I don't see that happening just because I think that Paul George and Russell Westbrook
right.
are close, and that's just not the way this works. This is a move that it'll be a part of their story here moving forward. To me, their best line, like if you want to try and actualize Russ, their best lineup is probably Russ, Norman Powell, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Marcus Morris. And that takes Ivica Zubac off the court. It makes them a worse defensive team. Does that work? I don't really know. I'm not totally sure. Maybe you can try and play Terrence Mann instead of Norman Powell to get a little bit more defensive ability on the court. Maybe you can try and play Robert Covington a little bit, but his shooting has been very hit or miss over the last few years. I don't know. I think that it's going to be hard. I think that they're going to end up having to really play a lot of lineups with Eric Gordon and Terrence Mann at the one, or Norman Powell. You could even play like Powell, Kawhi, Paul George, Zubac, and Morris. Maybe like there are ways to make it work. It's just going to be very complicated. I think the Plumlee move, I think they just needed 12 minutes a night. They needed 12 minutes a night for a backup center, someone that can run dribble handoff, someone who can provide instant rim running and dexterity offensively. Makes sense to me, right? Eric Gordon might be big for them. And I frankly don't know how much Eric Gordon has left in the tank based off of his stint in Houston.
I think he'll be happier. I mean, some of those press conferences have been pretty classic over the last year or two with Eric Gordon. I'm happy for him, man. I'm happy for him that he got out of there. He's going to play some playoff basketball. But they've got a bunch of guys. So I guess maybe that's the point. While I'm focusing on having, maybe two non-shooters on the floor, you might be right. They can mix and match. They can figure some things out. And who are the guys in the West? I mean, Jokic, obviously, but it's not like there's an Embiid and a Giannis that maybe they can go small. Maybe that's the way they do go.
Yeah, I think they can theoretically go small as long as against the Nuggets they'll have to go bigger. But the Nuggets don't. They have Aaron Gordon, but do you trust KCP against one of Paul George or Kawhi Leonard? That's what it's going to come down to on some level, right? Maybe that can work. I don't know. We'll see. It's gonna be tough.